trade wars, you know, the United States trade wars has completely landed all the entire world in a mess, because as you mentioned that, you know, he has put indiscriminate tariffs on everybody, and he has a particular way of looking at these trade. You know, we have a geopolitical, you know, tension with China. We are managing our ties, but India definitely believes in a multipolar Asia and a multipolar world. People in India are very angry because this is the first ever, I mean, in many ways, this is an unprecedented attack in the last 36 years, because this time the Pakistani terrorists not only entered Indian territory, really deep into Indian territory, but they did something that they've never done. So they went to a tourist spot and they segregated people on the basis of identity and religion, and they eventually landed up killing about 26, 27 Hindus and injuring 17 others.
Hello, my name is Marek Stefan. This is Układ Sił YouTube channel, and we are in Warsaw on Free Seas One Opportunity Conference, and today with me is Professor Svasti Rao, Jindal School of International Affairs Associate Professor and Associate Dean in OP Jindal Global University. Hello.
Hello, welcome.
So we are talking about the Free Seas initiative, but also this is a very close project to the another connectivity vision of IMEC,
yes.
Indian, Middle East, European corridor. Could you say something about this initiative and how close this initiative is to vision of the Free Seas Initiative, which is a vision of cooperation between countries in Central and Eastern
yes.
Europe? But also we see now that we see a lot of opportunities to cooperate with the Asian nations and Asian countries like India. So we have a IMEC, we have a Free Seas Initiative. How to compare this?
So thank you for the question. But first of all, let me just say that, you know, India and Poland relations have also sort of seen a steady growth, especially in the last 2 years. So Poland and India have always enjoyed a very good bilateral relationship, but it was only last year that we elevated to a level of a strategic partnership. And it is only logical that India should be looking more closely at Europe, because looking at Europe-wide engagement as well, I think the current political dispensation in India has been doubling down on its you know, different kind of cooperation pathways with Europe. So whether it is about having new strategic partnerships, whether it is about trade and services. I mean, right now we have about 200 billion worth of trade and services relationship between our two sides, and ultimately about developing more connectivity projects. So IMEC is of course very important and special to India, because IMEC was announced at the G20 Leaders Summit in 2023 September, and IMEC was one of the most talked about connectivity initiative back then. But unfortunately, less than a month after it was announced, there was a heinous attack by Hamas on Israel on the 7th of October. And ever since, IMEC has been on a back burner, at least in the eyes of the public, because I mean, from India we were looking at Dubai, and from Dubai we were entering the Middle Eastern countries and going all the way up Saudi Arabia, then connecting it to Haifa. And because the situation in Israel, and after that it remains so tense, and it still remains very fragile, ultimately IMEC was then to come to Greece through Piraeus, and then eventually into Europe. So even though the operational part of IMEC remains to be a little fragile, particularly because of the situation in Middle East, because even if peace were to return, the idea is that you have to get private investors to invest in these corridors. So how do you convince the private industry to invest in situations that remain geopolitically fraught and fragile? That remains to be a challenge, no doubt. But the central idea of IMEC is where the beauty is, which is that you have to connect diverse geographies. And from India's perspective, now you look at India-Europe. So one way to get to India-Europe is of course via IMEC, but we already have a lot of trade with Europe. I told you, the total trade in goods and services is humongous. Now, the problem is that most of the trade that is coming to Europe, from India, is basically routed to 2 or 3 main ports. These are Rotterdam, Hamburg, and Antwerp. And particularly, they are focused on Western Europe. And as India's strategic footprint and geoeconomic footprint rises in Europe and in other parts of Europe, in Central and East Europe, European markets, it is only logical that India is looking for more connectivity. So if you have seen lately that Prime Minister of India went to Marseille in France, because Marseille is a port city, and talked about Mumbai-Marseille connectivity. I, through my works, have been arguing that it's not just Mumbai-Marseille, but ultimately Mumbai-Marseille, then connecting it to Trieste, because Trieste in Italy is also connected to Central and East European countries very well, and also to Western European countries. Eventually Greece, and not just Piraeus in Greece, but also Thessaloniki, which is much better connected to the three seas countries, you know, the Central East European countries. It is only logical that India should be present at these conversations, because ultimately, if you look at the European leg of IMEC, without tapping into the 14 three seas countries, the story will not really be complete, because it is in this region that you see that China's 17+1 mechanism has not been working. It has been a victim of overpromise and under-delivery, as I said, and it is only logical for India to try and diversify, help these countries diversify, because India is a reliable partner. I mean, India is a trustworthy, reliable partner, and so is Europe for India.
So this initiative is somehow alternative for a Belt and Road initiative?
Well, yes, from India's perspective, we have always believed not in confrontation, but also in building complementarities and collaborations. So India is not a part of the BRI. India has always steered clear not only of BRI, but also of RCEP. These are both China-led and China-dominated. BRI is, of course, completely China. So, we have a geopolitical, tension with China. We are managing our ties, but India definitely believes in a multipolar Asia and a multipolar world. China, on the contrary, believes in a unipolar Asia. So, of course, there is a tension. But that said, we do not believe in confrontation. We believe in building complementarity. So, from India's perspective, even looking at connectivity, we are building complementarities, because if you look at our trade through that region, the traditional route is through the Suez Canal, of course, that everybody knows. And that is the reason why it's in trouble, because of the Red Sea and the Houthi menace out there. And India is looking at two parallel connectivities. One, of course, is the IMEC that we just talked about. The other is the INSTC, which goes from India, then goes to Iran, and then further up across Azerbaijan, and then to Moscow. But again, the problem with INSTC is that it has two sanctioned entities. Iran is sanctioned, and so is Russia. So the utility for India through INSTC is also limited. IMEC certainly is not really working, but India will be sort of, working on both these initiatives, because like I said, that for India, it is about building complementarities. But like I said, that when India is saying that China's 17+1 has not worked, it is only logical, because I think countries in the region are also looking at more trustworthy partners, and this is, I think, completely in sync with the common stakes that India and Europe has in trying to de-risk from China. And that is why I said that it goes a long way into how serious Europe is about de-risking from China. And Indian investments have been growing in the region. Poland, by the way, India today has about $3 billion worth of investments in Poland. And because here Poland becomes a key enabler. Not only that India has a strategic partnership with Poland, and for the CEE, this is the most important strategic partnership we have, right? We have several strategic partnerships in Europe, but for the CEE, Poland's is the most important one. And Poland is also a major defense industry player for India. Poland defense industries are present in India, but more importantly, Poland is chairing the Council of the European Union right now, and Poland is also chairing the 3 Cs. So I think it's very, very logical for the two sides to push for this conversation. And like I said, that maybe it is a little premature for India to become a full member to the 3 Cs. Of course, I understand that. But there is a mechanism of strategic partners for the 3 Cs, and we have a very active player from the Indo-Pacific that is a strategic partner, that is Japan. So why can't India become a strategic partner to the 3 Cs and eventually become a member whenever time is right? So I guess what is important here is that we are trying here to shape conversations in a way which is beneficial to all sides, and that is, I think, why I'm here as well.
You mentioned about European Union and current Poland presidential in European Union Council. So I want to ask you about the current trade war, because Trump administration decided to start a trade war with the whole of the world.
Yeah.
And now in Europe, in European Union, we see that the discussion about maybe we should speed up the dialogue with India to achieve some the new trade deal,
Yes.
free trade deal. So
Yes.
do you think that this is the possible that in the coming months, maybe coming months, we have some breakthrough in this case?
That's a very important question. India and the European Union have been negotiating a free trade agreement for the last 20 years, almost, almost. But it's also,
It's never ending story.
No, but then at the same time, I think it's important to convey to the viewers and to everybody that there was a second generation FTA negotiation that started after the war in Ukraine, when it became more of a strategic priority. Okay, before that it was too mired into a lot of technical hurdles, because European Union is a very difficult geo-economic bloc, and India, for its own reasons, had put a hold on negotiating FTAs, because India's FTAs have not really been able to favor India's exports. That's been the larger understanding, and the Indian government put a hold on the FTAs and all the bilateral investment treaties and tried to get into the details of why we have a low FTI utilization rate. Just to give you figures, our FTA utilization currently stands at about 20%, 25%, while the advanced countries' FTA utilization is somewhere around 70 to 80%. Okay, so that is why most of our FTAs are landing us in trade deficit. Anyway, that's a long story. Coming back to the present times, right now what we are negotiating with the European Union, after the war in Ukraine began, of course, it was put back on track, are three kinds of things. One is a FTA in goods and services, the other is a bilateral investment treaty, and third is a treaty on geographical indicators. And all these are important for having more exports from India as well. But there are certain problems. One is that Indian markets remain primarily very protectionist, and there are certain sectors that remain very protectionist, especially dairy and agriculture, because they will not be able to compete with the outside world if we were to open that. And then we also fear a lot of dumping, okay, by China and so on. But now comes Donald Trump. And as you rightly mentioned, Donald Trump has made it very clear, because India, US also have a very important trading relationship, close to 90, $100 billion, at least $125 billion. Yes, of course, India, US right now has a bilateral trade of about $120 billion. And out of which we have a trade surplus of $45 billion. So what the Donald Trump administration is pressurizing India is that we have to cut a deal with the United States so that we can reduce the export surplus that we have. And we are doing it because the pressure is such, and the trade wars, the United States trade wars has completely landed the entire world in a mess, because as you mentioned that, he has put indiscriminate tariffs on everybody, and he has a particular way of looking at these trade deals. Now, what happens in this case is that, yes, we are dealing with the United States. The United States is a very important strategic partner to India, but then this also creates and opens more space for India and the EU to also double down on their FTA. And I am of the opinion that some kind of FTA should be able to finalize before the end of this year, because this is something which was categorically mentioned by the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen when she recently came to India, along with the 21 commissioners of the entire college, of commissioners. So I think we will see some development there. It is both in the EU's as well as India's interest to look for more stable partnerships, and of course, like I said, that we have a humongous trading relationship. What I can just say that we need to be a little careful of, that in India, there are certain reservations around the carbon border adjustment mechanism, because in India, the industries look upon it as a constraining, factor, because it would make our exports to the EU very expensive. So we have to have better conversations on that. I do understand, because I work in Europe, so I do understand that the CBAM is the future. So, Indian industries have to somewhere fall in line, because regardless of whether we have an FTA or not, but the CBAM conditions are going to apply from 2026 January. So if we have an FTA, it also opens up more channels for climate financing, which is going to eventually help India. So I think these conversations have also become very important. I personally think that United States factor is going to be a kind of an enabler, a catalyst, if I may say, to bring the European Union and India closer. And please, let's not forget that when we look at Europe, it's not just the EU. EU is, of course, 27 member states, but India's first FTA with the Western world is also with the European countries. It's with the EFTA countries, the 4 non-EU countries, Norway, Switzerland, Liechtenstein and Iceland. And there the quid pro quo that we have been able to establish is that we open our markets in lieu of $100 billion worth of investment. So I think we have to sort of work out something similar. With the EU, it's much more difficult because of 27 member states agreeing to one thing. But then we also have one FTA negotiation going on with the UK. And again, we have set a deadline for this year. So what I'm saying is that Donald Trump's approach that is extremely destabilizing to the world right now, I think is good news for this, because we have to see some opportunity in this crisis.
So my last question to you is not related with the trade or free CIS initiative, but I want to ask you about the last clashes between India and Pakistan.
Yeah.
Do you think there is a direct threat that the Pakistan and India are going to war?
Well, so we have tried everything possible with Pakistan. We have tried talking to them. We have tried, peoples to peoples dialogue. We have tried basically everything with Pakistan, and nothing really works, because we understand that Pakistan as a state has to keep the issue of Kashmir alive for their own existence. That's the rhetoric. I mean, for them, the entire existence of Pakistan is somewhere anti-India. I mean, and for the Pakistani army, that remains to be the most important stakeholder in Pakistan, for them to retain their relevance in the eyes of the public, they have to do some anti-India activity. This time they went very far. It is true, people in India are very angry, because this is the first ever, I mean, in many ways, this is an unprecedented attack in the last 36 years, because this time the Pakistani terrorists not only entered Indian territory, really deep into Indian territory, but they did something that they've never done. So they went to a tourist spot and they segregated people on the basis of identity and religion, and they eventually landed up killing about 26, 27 Hindus and injuring 17 others. And the manner in which it has happened is something which is extremely bone-chilling, and for sure India is prepared to give a kind of an offensive response to that, because we realize that no matter how much you talk to Pakistan, it doesn't really serve anybody's purpose, because Pakistani army is always going to whip up something like this, because for retaining their own relevance. So it is very unfortunate.
So you expect maybe Air Force operation?
So very quickly, an all-out war is not something that we're looking at. India is a very peaceful country. We also understand that an all-out war is something that that is not going to solve the problem right now. We are also very well aware of this three-pronged destabilization that we have from Pakistan on the one side, from China on the other side, and now with an increasingly hostile Bangladesh. And what makes it very complicated for us is that China, even though there is an optics of normalizing ties with India, but China is propping up both Pakistan and Bangladesh, for a very anti-India kind of a destabilization. So we are very aware of this fragile situation. What I do not rule out is that the Indian government is mulling over a kind of a offensive strike on the terror camps, something like a Balakot, if you remember. I mean, a few years ago, we had responded because Pakistan had done the same thing in Pulwama. It kind of killed our armed forces, and then we responded by striking the terror camps. So we have something like that in mind, not a full-fledged war, because a full-fledged war, again, is not going to really solve the problem. We have to basically root out terrorism, okay? And I think, but when India does that, or when Indian Army chooses to do that, or the Air Force, as you rightly mentioned, I think this is going to happen at a time and place of India's choosing. And for sure, there is an understanding on that, but the details are, of course, very confidential. But at the same time, and it's also a moment of national crisis, because we understand that we have been trying to normalize the situation in Kashmir. The tourism industry had picked up very, very well. And after what Pakistan has done in those areas, it's a very cowardly attack. Certainly, there is the tourists. I mean, that industry is going to suffer. So ultimately, it's going to be the local Kashmiris that are going to suffer. So India has to put its own national security apparatus, in shape. We are also doing a lot of things that are internally required by us. But for sure, this is. You can say that right now, South Asia, that region of the world is extremely fragile and extremely unstable, and it is a concern for India, of course.
Professor Rao, thank you for your contribution. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you. It was a pleasure speaking to you.